If you have a studio and it's not making money, you don't have a studio. You have an expensive hobby. Okay. Regardless of the definition of a studio makes money. If you aren't making money in your studio, if you're not booking sessions, if you're not educating people, if you're not doing something to generate revenue, you do not have a studio. You have an expensive hobby. Yo, this video is sponsored by Peculiar Sounds. Check the link down in the comment section in the description of this video to get 10% off your order. All right, let's get into this video. So there was another comment that popped up on my video on Pro Tools that I thought was pretty. This came from the man in command. Okay, came from you. He says big studios have Pro Tools installed. Big studios that have Pro Tools installed are no longer the industry standard. That's why they're shutting down. I have most of the things that big studios have in my home studio, working on a bigger one for my other home. Really dope comment, and I really appreciate it. But this really sparked something in my mind. There's this concept that big studios, big box studios are shutting down, right? Recording studios are shutting down. You hear this, I've watched 10 videos in the last month that says recording studios are shutting down. Why recording studios are shutting down? Why they're shutting down? Why are studios shutting down? And so I started to ask myself the question, and I actually went and did some research. I used ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, what are some studios that have shut down and what are some studios that are still open? Because I know in the last year, I've been to at least 4 big box studios in different parts of the nation that are still open. And not only are still open, they're thriving. And not only thriving, they have been thriving since the 90s, since the 80s. A couple that I looked up have been open since the 70s. So I really want some hard data on, let me know in the comments section. I want some real hard data on what studios are shutting down. Let me know for real. I'm asking you the question because based on my research, yes, there may be some small kind of mom and pop studios that closed down. But overall, when I started researching some of the studios in some of the big cities, I found out that a lot of them are still open. Let me pull up my ChatGPT history because I did some research here. Give me a second. I'm gonna pull this up because I thought this was pretty interesting because it gave me some answers in the research. So I asked ChatGPT, what are some big commercial studios that are still operating today that were operating in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s? And it says several renowned music studios that were active in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s still operate today. Here are some notable companies. Abbey Road Studios. Is Abbey Road shutting down? Electric Lady Studios in New York. You got Ocean Way in Los Angeles. They also have one in Nashville. They're like a chain of studios. Lion Share Studios in Los Angeles. Farm Studios. So I started asking, okay, let's go into some demographics. What about Nashville? There's Sound Emporiums, RCA Studio A. I've been there. Black River Entertainment, former Soundstage. I think I've been to Soundstage before. Ronnie's Place, built in 1968, still going. 50 years. This studio is still open. Ocean Way in Nashville. Then I said, okay, what about Atlanta? They started saying Reel to Reel Studios, Tree Sound Studios, Patchwork. Patchwork is a dope studio in ATL, still open. Soul Asylum, I've heard of these studios. Are they all still open? Yes, they're still open. You know what I mean? These studios are still open. So I'm trying to figure out where the knowledge of studios are shutting down. Studios are shutting down. Studios are shutting down. I don't think they're shutting down. There may be some that are closing. There may be some that aren't making as much money as they were making in the 90s and the 80s. Maybe they're still thriving and living off of old money. I don't know. But either way, if you opened up your studio in the 80s and the 90s and you're still open in 2025, you have a dope studio, you're doing something right. So I think you can find these examples across the United States. There's still a bunch of big box studios in Texas and in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago. I didn't even go into Chicago and stuff like that. There's so many like commercial studios that are still open and still viable and still doing it. So I think what happened is in YouTube land and in social media land, there's this common assumption that with all of the stuff that's going on with technology, how people are able to record at home, how people are able to buy interfaces and computers and all of those things like that and have their own home studios. I got one here right in my basement, got my own full capable. I can do up to 64 tracks right down here in my basement. I have a full-fledged studio here in my basement of my home. And so I think with the advent of that, most people make the assumption that technology has and is killing studios. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't some studios that have went out of business. I'm saying that I think overall, there are still a lot of very notable studios that are still open, that are still working, that are still doing work every day, that are still booking. While we're talking, while you're watching this video, they have a session going on right now and they're doing work. Somebody's recording a record or an album or a band or whatever in the studio, because most people seek out studios for their sound. Go to Nashville and go see what's going on there. There's another dope channel here on YouTube called Andrew Masters. This guy literally goes all over the country touring studios, big box studios, home studios, all of those things like that. So now he's got hundreds of videos on his channel. So that's hundreds of studios across the nation, home and big box, commercial, whatever, that are working. Every video I've watched from him, these are always working studios. These aren't guys that are just sitting around chilling. Most people come to these studios because they're able to get work or what have you. So I think that's assumption, you know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people that have tried to open up a studio maybe in the last decade, and they didn't have a good experience, so they weren't able to market it right, and they didn't build that studio. They waved their hands at it and said, well, having a recording studio isn't worth the time now, having that or what have you. But I'll say something like this. This is something that my dad told me about business years ago, because if you can't maintain a studio, a recording studio, or maintain that, then your problem isn't necessarily a technology problem or a people aren't doing music anymore problem or whatever. Your problem is a marketing and growth and problem. Like, I think the studios that have remained open, they are the ones that have learned how to pivot and how to monetize. There's a really dope studio here in my city of Charlotte called GAT3 Studios. It's been open for decades on decades. But you know what they also do? They run an audio recording school out of their studio, as well as book sessions. And they stay pretty booked because I follow them on Instagram and they're always posting sessions. And so they keep the marketing up, they keep the promotion up, they pivoted into education. They are doing everything they can do to continue doing that. So this thing that my dad told me years ago, he said, if your business isn't making money, it's not a business, it's an expensive hobby. So I'll apply that to studio. If you're not educating people, if you're not doing something to generate revenue, you do not have a studio. You have an expensive hobby, whether you're running it out of your house, whether you have a commercial building in your city. If you're not generating revenue, it's not because of technology. It's not because of AI. It's not because of the home recording revolution. It is because you have not effectively learned how to run a business. The reason that I've been able to continually generate six figures in all of my business, to being able to build a seven-figure business across all of my things that I'm doing, is because I've learned how to pivot. I've learned how to rebrand myself. I've learned how to stay relevant. I've learned how to keep everything building. I've learned how to develop multiple sources of income that have multiple streams flowing into them. I've learned the art of business, not the art of art, not the art of being creative, not the art of trying to do, you have to figure out how to be business minded. So if you're not making money, you don't have a studio, you don't have a business, you have an expensive hobby. That goes for the bedroom producer. Hello, here I am in my bedroom, but it goes for the bedroom producer that if you're not making money, whether you're putting money up on, putting creations up on Spotify or whatever, Apple Music, whether you're having people coming in and recording in your house, if you're not generating revenue, I'm sorry to tell you, got a knock on your head. You don't have a business yet. It may develop into it. You don't have a business yet. You have an expensive hobby. You have an expensive hobby. You don't have a business unless you're making money, unless you're generating revenue and you're able to keep up with operating costs and you're able to keep a steady flow of clientele coming in. Otherwise, it's just a hobby. So I think it's a fallacy to assume that because of technology and all of these things like that, that studios are shutting down or studios aren't able to maintain their opening, and stay open or what have you. It's just the fact that you may not have figured out what you need to do, or that studio or that person may not have figured out what they needed to do to maintain relevancy or to continue building that business, to continue growing that business. Okay. So you have to be cognizant of those things when it comes to business. All right. Expensive, hobbies are okay. There's nothing wrong with expensive hobbies. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with it. Buying Jordans is an expensive hobby. I like buying Jordans. I have a bunch of Jordan 1s in different colors. That's an expensive hobby, collecting those. Fortnite is an expensive hobby. Buying all these clothes packs and all these little change of clothes and all these packs and stuff to go in the game is an expensive hobby. Playing video games is an expensive hobby. There's nothing wrong with that, but you have to determine whether or not you're trying to be in business or you're trying to have a hobby. So I wouldn't be so quick to jump out the window and say that all music studios are shutting down. I just don't think that's true, because you have so many examples of studios that have been open for decades and probably will continue to maintain their opening moving forward, because they learned how to pivot, they learned how to stay in business, they learned how to stay relevant, they learned how to keep. So I don't think that some of these big box studios, I don't see Ocean Way closing down anytime soon. I don't see Patchwork closing down anytime soon. I could be wrong. But I don't see any of these studios closing down, shutting down anytime soon. So that's what I kind of got, or what have you. So I just want to kind of dig into that or whatever. All right. So let me know what you guys think in the comments and we'll chop it up there. All right. I'm excited to reveal something game-changing for us and for you as producers and musicians. I want to introduce to you Peculiar Sounds version 2. We've introduced standalone mode, allowing you to use it independently from any DAW. You can now blend up to 2 sounds to create rich and complex textures. We added in 2 brand new effects, the Lo-Fizer and the Mod Filter. The Lo-Fizer gives you instant lo-fi vibes with just a button, while the Mod Filter adds dynamic movement and flow to any sound you apply to. And we also added the innovative new MIDI browser that provides you with hundreds of chord progressions, melodies, and drum loop MIDI files that you can drag straight into your DAW. And as a bonus, V2 now includes Sounds Off the Block expansion for totally free, bringing the total to over 400 patches. So as you can see, Peculiar Sounds V2 is not just an update, it's a revolutionary new plugin. So make sure you check the website right now and you can get your hands on this game-changing plugin.